Welcome to Legalized Negligence, where we don't have a problem holding lawmakers accountable for allowing doctors to not be accountable. Uh, Tonight we're going, well, I want to make a disclaimer first. Usually we forget, and somewhere during our podcast, we tell everybody that we're not attorneys and that we only share our personal experiences and hope that some people can learn something from that and help them deal with the issues that they're going to run into with Florida Statute 768.21 subsection 8. But I also want to make another disclaimer tonight. Anything that I happen to say in this podcast, I don't want anyone to hold my friend Travis responsible for that. Travis and I are two separate people. We have our own thoughts on things. We agree on a lot of things, but we disagree on some things. Travis is the most likable guy that you can ever meet in your life. He is definitely, if you looked up the term peacemaker in a dictionary, you would find a picture of Travis there. Travis is an all-around good guy. On the other hand, I'm somewhat of a jerk. I don't mind being very hyperbolic about my thoughts on things, and I don't pull punches, and I say what's on my mind, and I really don't care if it offends people. So if anything happens like that tonight, don't hold Travis responsible for that. He doesn't control what I think or say, just like I don't control what he thinks or says. So keep that in your mind. Travis is the good guy. I'm not.
Good cop, bad cop.
Yeah. So tonight we're going to take a little bit of a departure from the subsection 8 stuff that we generally talk about, but we're eventually going to bring that into the story that we want to share with you tonight. A couple of days ago, Heather Crawford, who works for First Coast News in Jacksonville, she's an anchor there, an evening anchor. She ran a story about a family from Georgia whose baby was sick. They took it to the hospital in Georgia, and I assume that the town they live in Georgia is fairly close to Florida, because the Georgia hospital said, you need to get this baby to the Children's Hospital in Jacksonville, Florida. So the family winds up in Florida, and from there things go so downhill that it has just absolutely made my blood boil for the past 2 days every time I've watched this video. So I'm going to let the video run. It's 8 minutes long. I'm going to let the video run in its entirety, and then I'm going to go back and make some comments about it. I just think it's very important that everybody hear the whole story. So let me see if I can get this going. Says I'm sharing the screen. I'm going to click on this. Travis, tell me if what you're seeing is this story coming up.
I just see the browser. It doesn't have the image yet.
Okay.
It says loading.
All right. But you can you see the picture of the family?
Nope.
Not yet.
Hang on, it's coming in. There it is. Now I can see it.
I'm going to go ahead and start this video. Is the picture big enough?
Could a medical condition be mistaken for child abuse? A Southeast Georgia family believes that's
better if you can maximize it.
After spending thousands of dollars on fertility treatments, they found out that they were pregnant with twins. But just months after they were born, the twins and their older sister, who you see right here, were ripped from their arms. Tonight, as they fight to regain custody, a First Coast News investigation into why they were taken and the child abuse doctor at the center of this case.
So we've been married 18 years. We always knew we wanted a big family.
Corey and Diana Sullivan started dating in 8th grade. Their desire to start a family came with years of infertility challenges.
We went to IVF and we got pregnant with Arabella. Our first round, which was amazing. It was costly. I think that round cost us approximately like $30,000.
After having their first child 4 years ago, they went through the IVF process all over again. And with the last 2 embryos, got pregnant with Christian and Amelia.
We had found out at around 29 weeks that she was diagnosed with severe intrauterine growth restriction.
The twins were born prematurely last July when Diana was 34 weeks pregnant. Her son weighed 5 pounds, her daughter just over 3 pounds. Amelia spent 42 days in the NICU. 7 weeks after she was discharged, their whole world changed.
I changed her after the feeding, and as I was changing her, I noticed that her leg was a little swollen. So I woke mom up and said, look, I don't like that her leg is swollen. I think we should take her to the hospital.
They took their 3-month-old daughter to the closest hospital in Camden County.
They told us she had a broken femur, which was shocking to us.
Amelia was rushed to Wolfson Children's Hospital in Jacksonville for more extensive testing. It revealed unexplained rib fractures and broken bones in various stages of healing.
The last report I read said 22.
22 broken bones.
And an 8-pound baby.
The Sullivans say they were questioned by Dr. Barbara Knox. She's a board-certified specialist in child abuse pediatrics at UF Health and listed online as an expert with the First Coast Child Protection Team. The Sullivans say she told them that their daughter had a grade 3 liver laceration.
She looked at me and said, in my 30 years of experience, the only way for a child to obtain this injury is for her to be punched repeatedly in the abdomen or she was drop kicked across the room. I said, she's 8 pounds. Wouldn't we see any type of physical marks on her body? Wouldn't she act like she's in pain? And she just kept saying no.
The couple says after being questioned by Dr. Knox, they had all 3 of their children removed from their custody.
They came and literally stripped poor Amelia out of my wife's arms while she was breastfeeding her and took our children from us.
Diana is not facing any charges, but in December, her husband was arrested and charged with aggravated battery and cruelty to a child.
Did you abuse your daughter?
Absolutely not.
5 months after Corey Sullivan's arrest, he still has not been indicted.
Well, I've missed my baby's first Christmas. I've missed my baby's first Easter. In a few months, I'll miss their first birthday.
The Georgia Bureau of Investigation says it completed its investigation and the case is now in the hands of the District Attorney's Office in Brunswick. Our requests for an interview were declined.
Do you think your daughter was abused?
Absolutely not.
The Sullivans believe their daughter's broken bones can be explained by genetic problems that started in utero. They had geneticist Dr. Anthony Persick review all of Amelia's records. According to his report, she was severely malnourished in the womb and that stunted her growth. He also noted bone demineralization. He wrote that the softness of her bones would allow for fractures to happen more easily without excessive force.
His exact explanation was even normal handling could have caused a rib fracture.
Geneticist Dr. Paldeep Atwal says Diana has since been diagnosed with a genetic connective tissue disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
We know that Ehlers-Danlos can increase your fracture risk and reduce bone mineral density.
What have you come to find out?
I found out that the child abuse pediatrician that led this investigation has very questionable history of diagnosing these children.
When we found out that she had got hired in Jacksonville, it made us sick.
Brenna Siebold is one of
100%.
several families who have spoken out against Dr. Knox after being investigated for child abuse.
It's been incredibly traumatic.
She and her husband were questioned by Dr. Knox about bruises on their baby when they took him to the ER for a fever in 2018.
It took 3 months to get finally the all clear. The field of child abuse pediatrics needs to be re-looked at and it needs to be reformatted. It's just, we've given way too much power to these people.
There is no doubt that some of the cases she identified as abuse were abused.
Dee Hall is co-founder of Wisconsin Watch. The nonpartisan investigative nonprofit news outlet has done extensive reporting on Dr. Knox. Wisconsin Watch shared the stories of 7 families, including the Siebold's, who faced child abuse investigations triggered by Dr. Knox over 7 years. Allegations it reported were later rejected by other doctors, police, and child welfare officials.
Things that could be attributed to numerous other causes in the cases that we examined attributed to child abuse exclusively.
In 2019, Dr. Knox was placed on paid administrative leave by the University of Wisconsin, according to this letter obtained by Wisconsin Watch. The letter says it was based on concerns about timely completion of her work and possible intimidation of internal and external colleagues. In a statement to First Coast News, UW Health said Dr. Knox resigned before an investigation was completed. She was then hired in Alaska to lead a statewide child abuse clinic, where she worked for 2.5 years before getting hired by the University of Florida in 2022.
In Alaska, similar allegations emerged that she was bullying and belittling staff, trying to, coerce them into labeling children as abused in cases where the other staff members did not feel that was the case.
We reached out to Dr. Knox multiple times, but did not get a response. UF Health at Jacksonville declined our interview requests, but stands behind her and says she's helped make the community a safer place. A spokesman said due to privacy laws, they cannot comment specifically on these allegations, but no decisions are made by any one person nor made lightly. In general, allegations of child abuse do not proceed to court unless law enforcement and prosecutors, in consultation with child protection officials, determine the evidence is strong and compelling. When medical evidence is used, review occurs at multiple levels. The statement goes on to say Dr. Knox's expertise in her field is well established, as are her positive contributions on behalf of children. While the Sullivans go through the court process fighting to regain custody of all 3 of their children, they hope genetic testing will show Amelia has metabolic bone disease.
Try to keep myself going, thinking that for sure the truth is going to come to light and what's right is going to happen.
I can't believe that there's this much power in the state's hands.
Now, Wilson Children's Hospital says its employees are required by law to report suspected child abuse to DCF, which it did, and then DCF investigates. Dr. Knox is not employed by Wilson. She's a member of the UF Child Protection Team to which DCF refers cases. We have reached out to the agencies involved in Florida and Georgia in this case. All declined to comment on camera, citing privacy laws, but you can read their full statements and UF Health's in this story on firstcoastnews.com, and we will continue to follow this case closely.
Thank you, Rich. And as you heard him just say, there's still a lot
Hang
of
on a
people
minute. Let me
without
get rid of
power
that.
tonight. And as you see in these pictures, we have downed power lines, trees split in 2, and at least 1 crushed car, just leaving a mess.
Sorry about that. I guess the next news story popped up on there. First of all, I want to thank Heather for running that story. I think she did a great job with that. And she brought out so many things that I wrote to her yesterday morning after I watched the story. And I said, you've only touched on the incompetence of DCF. And I wound up sending her all the documentation that I had pulled together in my mom's case, because DCF, they failed so horribly in the investigation in my mom's death that I had to appeal it. And it took me months to appeal it, because when I first tried to appeal it, it was like so blatant that they had done this horrible investigation. And when I tried to appeal it, they told me that there was no way that anyone could appeal their findings, that there was nothing in their policy and procedure manuals that allowed anyone to appeal their findings. And I thought, well, that's insane, because the people have a right to petition government for a redress of their grievances. So there's got to be a way to do that. And it took me some weeks, but eventually I was able to speak with the director of Adult Protective Services, and he was the only shining light in the whole thing to do with my mom. He said, if you think you have some new evidence, send it to me and I'll look at it. And I did. And he called me a couple of days later. He said, you are absolutely right. We dropped the ball on this. I will reopen the investigation, and me and my deputy will do the investigation ourselves. And they totally reversed the original investigative findings, and they found the nurse in my mom's case negligent on 7 counts, which was what they had investigated, 7 different allegations. And then he told me that that DCF didn't have the teeth to do anything about it, that I had to then forward my complaint to the Department of Health. And so I did. And we can talk about that another day, but it was just about a mess with the Department of Health. And that's the point in me wanting to bring this story tonight. I know it doesn't really have anything to do with subsection 8, but it does have to do with the administrative agencies in Florida, which answer to the legislature. So the legislature is responsible for that family being torn apart. The legislature is responsible for the financial burden that family is going to be put under to try to fight this in court. That the legislature of Florida, there is blood on their hands for this happening to that family and every other family. And while they're walking around enjoying their summer vacation, there are families in Florida that are being torn apart by the administrative agencies who do not hold doctors and nurses accountable. Now, before my blood pressure comes out of my eyeballs, I'm going to stop for a minute and take a sip of Mountain Dew, and I'm going to let Travis share some thoughts.
Well, that's why they have immunity, isn't it? The legislature?
Yeah, that's exactly why.
Yeah. Well, I was looking at the trail of Dr. Knox, and it looks like she originated out of Cincinnati. I'm not positive, but that's where Florida has a license under the same name. Then she also had a license in Alaska, as the story said. But when I went to Wisconsin, the Wisconsin was referencing the Alaska address, or the Alaska license. But she's still clear and active, and lists the city of Jacksonville currently. So if you're in Jacksonville, beware.
I can't imagine now, as most people know, I live in Tennessee. I am a citizen of Florida. I was born in Jacksonville back in 1958 and spent a great deal of my life in Florida. I grew up in Florida, went to school in Florida, spent some, until I was into my 20s when I joined the Navy. But my whole family is from Florida. And I've got to believe that you've really got to be living under a rock in the state of Florida if you haven't heard of the case of Maya Kowalski. I mean, everybody knows about Maya. Around the world, they know about Maya. And once again, the Department of Children and Families, DCF, was responsible for taking that young girl out of her family, and the mother realizing that the only way that they would ever get her out of the care of the state and back into the family is if the mother committed suicide. And the mother gave her life in order for her daughter to be brought back into the family. And I think the legislature of the state of Florida should hang its head in shame for the way that these doctors and these agencies are allowed to run over the rights of people. It just absolutely infuriates me. And they go into Tallahassee for 2 months out of the year, and then the rest of the year they post pictures on their Facebook page of what they had to eat tonight. And I really don't care that Joel Rudman eats shepherd's pie and drinks beer every Thursday night in his house. I really don't care about that. What I care about is that families are being torn apart, and this legislature for the past 34 years cannot get off of its backside and do something about this. This just makes me upset.
What I understand is why we, the people, aren't more active in taking seats from those who sit in the seats. What does it take for us to start thinking about running for political office if need be? They're active, 3 months out of the year, and then they go back and, kind of meet with people periodically, but for the most part, they do whatever their their normal profession is.
That's correct, but it doesn't mean that they aren't supposed to address the needs of the people during those other 10 months. They're supposed to be available to answer phones, to answer emails, to answer letters, to have in-person meetings, and they don't treat it like that. I have followed them for 4 years now since my mom died. And what they do is they use the delegation meetings that happen in the fall to start putting on their dog and pony show for people. And then when the legislature goes into session, the first couple of days, citizens drive from all across the state of Florida to Tallahassee to meet with them, to tell them what they need from them, and the legislators have turned this into giving out treats in their offices, playing their guitar and doing karaoke with it. I mean, it literally is bread and circuses. I would be embarrassed if I walked into a legislator's office and they're handing out candy to people instead of sitting there very solemnly having serious conversations with the citizens of Florida about what their needs are and how they can help them address their needs. And frankly, Travis, and I know that you don't get as upset as I do, but frankly, it's time we start calling them out by name. I played the game with them this past year, and I was polite. I was civil. I wrote them emails. I addressed them as civilly as possible, and I waited to see what they would do. And Senator Yarborough, oh, please send us whatever you got. Oh, please tell us if there's something we can do. Oh, please show us things that we haven't looked at before. And the moment the legislature went out of session, he hasn't returned any of my correspondence to him. And it's time we start shaming them by passing this information around to as many people as we can possibly get it to say, this is what your legislature does. They go up there and they put on a show for you for 2 months. And then they go back home and they attend strawberry shortcake festivals and every kind of thing imaginable. And that's what they put. Just go through any of their Facebook postings and see what they're showing you. They're not telling. That ran in the Jacksonville News. Everybody across the state, because of the internet, can see that story. And I guarantee you the legislators see that story as well. And how they can sit at their dinner table tonight and think about that family. They still haven't got their children back. I mean, this makes no sense to me. And what is it going to take to light a fire under the citizens of Florida to have them hold their legislators accountable?
So has there been no court that they've been able to go to?
No, I'm only going off of what Heather reported in her story. He was arrested. He bailed out. He still hasn't been indicted. That means he still hasn't been charged with anything. It's all based on this one kook doctor who's had to leave at least 2 other states for doing the same thing. And this is the important part that people need to pay attention to. The Department of Health in Florida issued that woman a license. Now, if Mark Delegal wants to know where the medical malpractice cases are coming from, turn your television on, Mark. Turn your television on and look at these stories. These are the doctors that are practicing in the state of Florida. And don't tell me that the legislature is concerned about making sure everybody has adequate access to health care. Because if this is the access that they have to that kind of health care, what good is it? People, you want to talk about, I'm sorry, one last thought and then I'll shut up. If you want to talk about institutional betrayal, you can't get a better textbook case for institutional betrayal other than this one. That family and those children were betrayed by the medical profession, and now they're betrayed by their government because their government is the one that lets doctors like that practice in the state of Florida. I'll shut up and calm down, Travis.
I wonder if he can force the issue by filing a 1983 suit because he was arrested. His rights were violated. and no charges were brought. So it seems like a clear win unless they bring charges. And then once he has charges, then he can fight them. And then when he wins, he can do another 1983.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's exactly what he should do. And I hope some lawyer in the state of Florida sees that news story and contacts him. I hope that's exactly what happens. And I hope they sue the pants off of that doctor and that hospital. And if the legislature didn't have immunity, I'd like to see everyone sitting in the Senate and the House in Florida get sued as well. How dare you? How dare you tear families apart like this? You are supposed to be there to protect our rights. And you
This
were
would actually be funny. This would be funny if he had to file a 1001 suit to compel the state to do their job to charge him in order to get into court.
I'm sorry, I'm still a little upset. You're going to have to say that to me again.
Well, there's a federal statute. I think it's a 1001, 42, whatever, or 18, where you can compel a government agency to perform their function. Either to abide by the law or to stop breaking the law.
Okay, I'm with you now.
Okay, so since they've charged, or they haven't charged him, but they arrested him and hasn't charged him, I wonder if he can compel them to charge or to dismiss the charges. That might be another way to move things along. Because once that's resolved, then do they have anything to hold their children from him and his wife?
Well, they kept Maya. I don't even remember how long they kept Maya from her family. I mean, they had beat that family down to nothing, to where they would be on the phone with Maya, the hospital staff and the social workers and DCF would be on the phone with her when she spoke to her mom, because her mom wasn't allowed to see her in person. And they would tell her mom would ask her a question about, are they treating you good, honey? And you'd hear the social worker or DCF step in, you're not allowed to ask that question. And I'm thinking, what are we, peasants? What are we, slaves on a plantation somewhere? And this is how the state treats us?
We were talking earlier, we both kind of had the same thought about using the oath.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder if there's some ground there. For being a doctor, Hippocratic oath, do no harm.
Well,
but if she's doing psychological harm,
even that, that's an old thing. There are some, there is no standard Hippocratic oath anymore. In fact,
I know they changed it so many times.
Yeah, some doctors don't even recite an oath. Other medical schools create their own oath. There is no standard Hippocratic oath, but just like a judge or a sheriff or whoever has to, the governor of the state has to swear an oath. These doctors should have to swear some sort of oath to the citizens of the state of Florida. Because right now, the citizens have allowed their government to get so far out of control that they can rip your family to pieces and then make you have to pay to put it back together. And if this doesn't make the citizens of Florida angry, then I don't know what to do. I honestly don't know what to do. If it's not bad enough that you can't fight the system for the loved one that we all lost because they died due to medical malpractice, if this story doesn't just rip you apart, you should be ashamed of yourself. I'll just say it. Travis isn't saying it. I'm saying it. And if you don't like me, and if you want to leave my Facebook group because I said that, go ahead. Because if you're not just as angry as I am, then you've got the problem.
Uh-oh. Sorry, I got a problem.
Yes.
No, I'm a subtle angry.
Your anger shows in different ways, Travis. You stay
that it does.
You stay up till 5:30 in the morning until you have to put toothpicks in your eyes because you're reading so much law, trying to figure out how to hold them accountable. Your anger just comes out in other ways.
Yeah.
But I know it's there. I know you well enough that I know it's there. I honestly don't know what to
And the thing is,
say.
we do it to ourselves because we don't participate. They get power and they run with it, and we don't put them in check. It's really our fault. Those who came before us, their fault. How do you reverse it? Except by taking the seat and just doing what needs to be done.
Yeah. Yeah. And I understand your point there. We all have our own special talents. Your talents, and I'll use you as an example. Your talents, I think, are better suited to do research, work on like this AI stuff that you're doing right now. You can be of more of a benefit with what you currently do every day to help repeal subsection 8 than if you ran for the House or the Senate. Because the truth is, if you ran for the House or the Senate, you're going to have to divide your time between everything from trying to repeal subsection 8 to the issuance of hunting license, or do you have to have lights on your boat when you go out at night? You're going to have to deal with every little law that comes up, and your time's going to be divided. I would rather see a guy like you focus his time where his knowledge and skills are, because you're going to get more done that way. There's some people that have creative abilities like building websites or art. Other people are great public speakers. Everybody has something that they can bring to the table that we can put together a force to be reckoned with. And I honestly don't think that most of the legislators even understand the issue if they've heard of it. It's only certain ones that, we mention it to them, it piques their interest, they start to learn about it, and they get involved in it. But they've also got people calling them about, property rights and eminent domain rights and, all kinds of stuff. So I think that people still need to have a fire lit under them, but then whatever special skill that they have, bring that to the fight. It's an example I would use of that is, and I'm not laughing at veterans because I am one myself, but I have met more special forces guys since the Iraq war started after September 11th. Every guy I meet, well, I was special forces. Well, and I'm thinking, well, like, who worked in the mess hall, man? Who worked out in the auto shop and kept the tanks and the jeeps and stuff running? We all aren't special forces. And my point in saying that is that we all have something to contribute. And if we all contribute that, we have a very strong army of people who can get something done when we want it done. I'm sorry I let my anger get the best of me, Travis, but this thing has just been on my mind for 2 days. And I bet I've watched that video a dozen times now. And every time I see it, I just see images of these legislators, posting where they're going to this, dinner here, and they're meeting with this, family, or this, their families getting together for this event or that event. And I'm thinking, did you just turn your back on the people of Florida when the legislature went out of session? Did you not follow up with the people who took time out of their life to drive up there and present to you whatever the issue was that was important to them? Do you just look at us like peasants that you've got to entertain for a couple of days?
Yeah. 3 minutes. That's all they got to put up with.
Yeah, and then on the people's side of it, you want to limit yourself to the 1, 2, or 3 minutes that they're going to give you when you do go up there, instead of spending this time, to actually do something about it, and to cultivate a relationship with a couple of legislators like your House rep and your senator. Cultivate a relationship with them now. Take the time to meet with them now. If you can't drive to where they are, call them and, have an hour-long phone call and explain this to them. If we don't do our part, how can we expect them to do anything?
Yeah.
I never was a fan of Lincoln, but if Lincoln really did say, by the people, for the people, and of the people, well, then that means it's our job to be involved, And if you're just going to sit back and let somebody else do it, or, it's that whole, well, I gave it the office, I voted, I paid my taxes, they're supposed to take care of it. No, if you want to know about getting involved in government, just look at the American Revolution. Those people got involved to the point that they swore an oath on their life. They were willing to put their lives and their fortunes on the line for something that they believed in. And modern day Americans will click something on Facebook, and think that they've done the equivalent. So I guess our numbers will drop tomorrow morning after I post this.
Yeah, but you'll get a good night's sleep tonight, though.
Yeah, I guess I got it off my chest until it boils back up again.
So with the baby, is there not a genetic test or whatever that they can do to just quickly prove?
Well, didn't they say they did that? They said that the test was.
They were diagnosed. I just don't know if that was an opinion diagnosis or it's like a clinical test diagnosis.
Well, if I remember right, at the end of the story, that they reported that the blood work has been sent off, or the whatever tissue samples or whatever, and they're waiting to see what they come back with. And if they come back with this baby has this disease, but the whole point of this, and don't get me wrong, DCF is there for a good reason. There are people out there who abuse their children, and there are children out there who abuse their parents. It's the intent of having a department like DCF. I understand it, but I think it has grown so large that they forgot where they came from and they forgot who they answer to. And now it's completely turned on its head, where the people have allowed the state to assume so much power that they can literally tear your family apart with nothing more than the belief of a doctor who is now in at least her third state, because she can't seem to hold a job anywhere because she bullies people and she wrongly diagnoses children, and she is viewed as some kind of expert. Don't forget, the Florida Department of Health vetted this woman and they issued her a license. And Florida Department of Health is responsible to the legislature. And right now, your legislators are out on the beach, they're at pool parties, they're eating dinner out on town, while that family is sitting there figuring out what their future is going to be. And I find that absolutely disgusting.
It would be interesting to see what other injuries the child has incurred while in DCF's care.
Yeah, that's a very good point that you made this morning on the phone. They claim that they documented 22 fractures in that child. It'd be interesting to know how many fractures does a child have when she's handed back over to her family.
And then you get a charged child abuse against them.
Yeah.
Immunity. Never mind.
But it's just the fact that they have this much power, man. To be able to come in and tear your life apart like that. How did they get that kind of power? That it cannot be presumed that when the people agreed to create a state called Florida, that they were willing to give up the right that they have to protect their family. I just don't know how it has gotten turned so upside down.
Interpretation of law?
I don't know, man. You know that I'm fond of saying no matter what the topic is, if you dig deep enough, you'll find that the answer is it goes back to the people. The people
Yeah.
allowed it to happen. And the people that I'm not talking about this current generation, but over the years, the people have allowed their government to get so far out of control that this is what we're living under now. And I'm not one for overstating things, but this is tyrannical. This is absolutely tyrannical when they can tear your family apart and take your children out of your home on nothing more than the belief of some doctor like this. And I guarantee you the state won't do anything to her. If they find that the baby does have this disease, the state won't do anything to her. How many other families has she done this to? We saw up in Wisconsin, there was a whole group of them that she did it to. And it was bad enough that the state of Wisconsin was investigating her. So she resigned before the investigation was over. And she goes to Alaska, does the same thing in Alaska.
Yeah, if there's an investigation started, it should be completed.
Yeah, it should. And Florida should send her back to Wisconsin when they're ready to prosecute her. Because Florida has taken her on. I hope people, if anybody watches this podcast, I hope you send the link to your legislators and tell them, watch this. This is what you are responsible for.
Yeah. This is the title, Jury Rejects Child Abuse Charges Triggered by Former University of Wisconsin Doctor. Yeah, Google that title, find it.
Was that one of the cases in Wisconsin?
Yes, November 13, 2021 is the publishing date.
Yeah, I did check in. I told you I was going to look into that Maya group today, and I asked in there if Knox was involved in that at all, and they said no. And of course, it had already hit me. Well, no, she was only hired in Florida in 2022, and what happened to Maya Kowalski was several years ago. They just only this past year got into court with it. But it's basically,
yeah, really. Go ahead.
I was just saying, it's basically the same story. The state walks in, takes a child or more away from the family, and just destroys their lives.
I wonder what's the difference between a nurse or doctor purposely injuring a patient and this doctor purposely injuring the family of patients by making false accusations.
Yeah, well, I know that if you make a false accusation against a police officer, there are charges for that. There's law that covers that.
Yes.
So I don't know in this case. I'll start looking into it and see if I can find anything. But these are the things. The reason this gets me so angry is because the people who want to keep subsection 8 in place, their response to us when we say we want it repealed, their response to us is, well, we gave you the Department of Health if you want to hold the doctor accountable. And you've heard me say over and over and over again, the Department of Health is no remedy. They do not take care of the things they should be taking. The Sabrina Davises are the rare exception, where a case actually gets to a final conclusion. And even then, the fine to that doctor was a joke. $7,500, really? You kill a man, $7,500?
Yeah, Department of Health, their only ability maximum is to revoke the license.
Yeah.
That's it. They can impose a fine, guidance goes up to $10,000 and revoke the license. That's about it.
Yeah, I like to always put things, when I'm trying to think through any situation, if I'm having difficulty with it, or maybe as a double check, I always do it in the negative. You know, kind of like if you go 2 plus 3 equals 5, well, then 5 minus 3 should equal 2. You know, always kind of do it backwards to check yourself. I wonder what would happen if this was actual child abuse. Think that family, that husband or wife, or maybe both, would go to prison? You know, they would.
Yeah.
You know, if it really was child abuse, they would go to prison. So should it not go the other way? That if you're going to put them through all of this, the same stuff they would go through if they were actually guilty of abusing that child, should the same sentence not apply to the doctor that caused all of it?
That'd be kidnapping.
Yeah, at the very least. You know,
Yep.
We were talking the other day about court cases where, you know, if you want to push the court case all the way to trial and you lose, should you pay the defendant's legal bills? You know, I mean, look at what all you put them through. And they turned out to be not guilty. Well, then you should be responsible for paying their legal fees. Well, shouldn't the same hold true here? If it turns out that this child does have this disease and all of this is just a bunch of nonsense, shouldn't the same kind of sentence apply to that doctor and that hospital and DCF? You know, they're just as rogue as some of these cops that you see, but, you know, taking people down because they, you know, they won't give them their name or they won't tell them why they stopped them. You know, they've just gotten so far out of control. Well, before I say something I'll regret, so far I don't regret anything I've said tonight. But before I do you have anything you want to add, Travis?
Like, subscribe, join the group.
Yeah, and especially this podcast. Share this around, man. Share this with, you know, people in your Facebook community, other whatever the other social media you use. Get people to see it. Send it to your legislators. Say, this is what's happening right under your nose. And this department, the Department of Children and Families, is your responsibility. You have the authority to govern them. Think about that the next time you go on your Memorial Day vacation, while you're at the beach and this family's sitting there trying to figure out what their future is going to be.
What your daughter, what their child looks like
Yeah.
today. If they haven't seen them.
Yeah. I mean, what did the man say? He missed her first Christmas. He missed her first Easter. He's about to miss her first birthday, all because of the state of Florida. But anyway, now do you see why I gave the disclaimer at the beginning of the podcast, Travis? So I'll give it again. Travis is the good guy. I'm the one who's not. So, well, Travis, I appreciate your time.
I appreciate yours. Appreciate all you do for us.
All right, man. I'm going to stop this video and we'll chat for a minute.
All right.
No, that's not the one I wanted. Hang on a minute. I almost ended the meeting.